winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
100 hours on this Friday, the 26th of September, 2025. A warm welcome to Africa World Hour, certainly wrapping up the week. I must say, I don't know about you, but it feels like it's been the longest week. So happy Friday, you made it. So let's tell you what's happening in and around your world, from the heart of the continent to all corners of the globe. One planet, countless stories. And do we have countless stories for you today? Quite a lot of breaking news stories, interesting news developments. So stay with us. Here's a look at your top stories.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we start with this story. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg saying that she's not afraid of Israel as she sails with the global Sumud flotilla toward Gaza, accompanied by many other activists and lawyers. The flotilla, which was struck overnight in a drone attack as well earlier this week, comprises of around 50 civilian boats that carries essential supplies such as milk, baby formula, diapers and medical resources. Are there to support Gazians who have 2 million residents living under siege. Thunberg emphasizes that although an international aid flotilla shouldn't have to exist, it will continue its efforts to delivering humanitarian aid.
We are continuing our journey towards Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid to a population that is being systematically starved. That's a continuation of decades and decades of suffocating oppression, apartheid and occupation. There are over 2 million people who are living trapped under a siege, who are being systematically starved by Israel. And we are doing our bare minimum and stepping up when our governments are not fulfilling their legal obligations to act to prevent a genocide.
Zimbabwe's ZANU-PF leader, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, has made changes to his leadership. Among the key changes, Treasurer General Jacob Francis Nzwida Milimo Mundeda has been appointed Secretary General of the party, while former Secretary for Legal Affairs Patrick Anthony Chinamasa has taken over as Treasurer General. These changes are effective immediately and underscore the party's enduring commitment to its policies, he says. The move comes amid rising speculation over succession dynamics within the party. Here's more from political analyst Rejoice Ngwenya.
Christopher Mtswangwa, the ZANU-PF spokesperson last week, alluded to that this is a conference that is virtually focusing on matters of economic policy and international relations. So in principle, one cannot argue that this shifting of entities within the party are to do with the conference. However, you know that as a revolutionary party or a nationalist party, whenever these political officials gather together, there will definitely be discussions around the issues of succession. It would mean that by the time the officials get to the conference, they have an idea of which perspective or which political alignment is likely to be associated with the future.
And former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has been involved in discussions about establishing the Transitional Authority in Gaza. This after a ceasefire was agreed to. Blair's office says that he would not support anything that displaces the people of Gaza. The BBC's James Landale has those details.
For months, policymakers around the world have been working on plans for post-war Gaza, how to govern, secure and rebuild the Strip if ever the fighting were to stop. Donald Trump discussed the latest proposals with Arab leaders at the United Nations this week. At their heart is the idea of Gaza being run by a transitional authority, with UN backing and Gulf support before being handed back to Palestinian control. One proposal that's said to have gained support in Washington is for Tony Blair to lead that authority. The former Prime Minister has been closely involved in drawing up some of the plans.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says he has a final say on who becomes a member of cabinet. He was reacting to reports that the leader of the Democratic Alliance Party, who is a part of the Government of National Unity as a party, is considering replacing members of his party deployed to cabinet. The DA is reported to be preparing to reshuffle its cabinet deployees, with some of them likely to face the chop. Ramaphosa explains.
The DA is a participant in the Government of National Unity. They have deployed a number of ministers and deputy ministers. And in the end, if they have to change any minister or deputy minister, they have to come to me. And I have to agree. Because in the end, as president, I'm the one who appoints ministers and deputy ministers. So I have the last word.
And finally, the British government has announced a new digital ID scheme, which it says will make it tougher to work illegally in the United Kingdom. The ID cards would need to be produced when applying for a job. Critics have voiced concern about personal freedom. At a speech in London, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that it was too easy for people to work illegally in the UK.
Frankly, we've been squeamish about saying things that are clearly true. It's not just that it's not compassionate left-wing politics to rely on labour that exploits foreign workers and undercuts fair wages, but the simple fact that every nation needs to have control over its borders. We do need to know who is in our country.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Now, the action heats up this Saturday, 27 September. Orlando Pirates takes on Yoli DODJ in the DODD in the CAF Championships League Round 2 prelims, live from Orlando Stadium. So don't blink, don't miss a moment's kickoff. That's at 1500 hours only on SABC1 and SABC Plus. The battle begins now.
Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Binal Sport depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Tshepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is exactly 9 minutes past 9. Authorities in Madagascar have declared a dusk to dawn curfew in the capital Antananarivo after protests over from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. The restrictions is set to remain in force until public order is restored. That's according to security officials. The protest began when hundreds of mainly young people took to the streets earlier this week, demanding reliable electricity and clean water. Power outages in the city often last more than 12 hours a day, crippling homes and businesses. To speak a little bit more about the situation in the country, we're joined now by Nciko Arnold, a researcher at Amnesty International East and Southern Africa's regional office. So we'll connect with him in just a moment to talk about what is happening there. So just to quickly recap on it. So during demonstrations that were held yesterday, police used rubber bullets, tear gas and forceful tactics to break up crowds. Some roads were barricaded with burning tires and rocks. There were reports of looting at stores and appliance shops and even banks being looted. Several stations of the city's new cable car system were set on fire. So let's see if we can get back Nico Arnold, researcher at Amnesty International East and Southern Africa Regional Office. Okay, we'll get to him in just a moment.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Our fitness coach, her name is Yvonne Dimakazo Pasha. How to remain consistent with gyms, Dima, and I'm going to put you on the spot right now. As we are talking, I will send you my picture and I want you to tell me what you think I should work on. Because, you know, when I look at myself, Dima, I think I'm very handsome. I'm so good looking, oh my goodness. Like here at Channel Africa where I work, I think I'm one of the most good looking people ever. Like sometimes when I look at myself in the mirror, I never get used to how good I look. I'm just amazing.
You're okay with the way you're looking. You wish people could and now you want to put me on the spot.
do I need gym?
Yeah. I mean, if you can just consider eating healthy, cutting down a few foodstuffs such as junk.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Nighttime radio, just the way you like it. On Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Okay, back to Madagascar, where, as we mentioned, that authorities have declared a dusk to dawn curfew in the capital, Antananarivo, following protests yesterday, Thursday, that occurred for more than 12 hours a day, saw power outages in the city. And we also saw police using rubber bullets on demonstrators. So we are on the line now to Nsiko Arnold, researcher at Amnesty International East and Southern Africa Regional Office. I hope you can hear us now. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. What can you tell us about the situation on the ground in Madagascar at the moment, particularly Antananarivo?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. As many people already know, young people, several sections of young people in Madagascar really came together under the banner of Gen Z for a mega peaceful protest. And the main demands were really to do with water shortages and power cuts that have been hitting several households in the country. And these issues were really connected very easily by the protesters to broader socioeconomic problems in the countries to do with corruption and to do with bad governance. So the Malagasy government, rather than managing the protest in light of its human rights obligations, it made recourse to the use of unlawful force because the government did not facilitate the protest. It did not protect protesters from any form of violence and just went to the use of force. And so you've already spoken about the use of tear gas, rubber bullets, live ammunition on the protesters. And so far, 5 people have been reported dead, including a baby who was suffocated by tear gas. Several people have been arbitrarily arrested on unknown charges, and they've been placed in unknown locations so far. That's currently the situation in the country. The government did impose a curfew, and the curfew is to be starting from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. But the situation is still really very volatile because there are again another protest that has been planned for tomorrow from around morning hours.
And out of the dusk to dawn curfew that has been implemented in order to institute a public order, as law officials are saying. Is there a special public enforcement agency that is deployed for this, and I'm just trying to get a sense of the training behind those who are going to maintain law and order, given the fact that you've mentioned that there have been what appears to be human rights abuses?
Yeah, so in terms of the modus operandi when it comes to managing protests in Madagascar, the legal framework is actually not clear. So the government rely on a law which date back from the 1960s, and which really give the authorities really broad and discretionary powers in terms of managing public order. So you see that just like protesting, for example, requires a prior authorization, and the parameters of under which circumstances authorization can be granted or not are not really clear. And really, under Malagasy international obligations, it just suffices for there to be a notification granted. So the parameters of the law really around public order are the same way as when it comes to managing protest are not really clear in Madagascar. It's really vague powers are given to the state by this particular law, and we've been calling this out as Amnesty International for a number of years now.
Mm-hmm. I'd imagine then that if there isn't a clear delineation of roles in law enforcement officials for public order policing, the likelihood of there being a dedicated unit that investigates such brutality during protests is very slim, that they wouldn't be concerned about that.
Yes, because as I said, we just need to have, a protest, participating in a protest which was not authorized, and on that basis, that is already really criminalized, and this is on the basis of this particular public order. And then in terms of investigating actually officials themselves, you see that the problem is very systematic. There's actually a problem with the law itself allowing for these violations. So one of the ways toward addressing these issues is really for Madagascar to align itself first with its regional obligations under the African Union and international obligations at the United Nations when it comes to managing protests, and really questions of training of officers really come in, how to handle protests in a really human rights consistent manner. These elements are still missing in Madagascar currently in their legal framework and in the way the state is supposed to be handling protesters. So the modus operandi has always been criminalizing, any protest that was not authorized, and then on that basis, people are put in prison, and many people are then released on suspended sentences, which can go up to 5 years. Really, just a way of controlling people to have that fear of engaging in further protests, rather than actually managing public order.
Your role as Amnesty International obviously is imbued with a level of objectivity, because if I look at some of the reports, including media reports, they have called, and given the visuals that we've seen, that these protests have been violent. We've mentioned that there were burning tires, barricading of roads, the homes of 3 politicians known to be close to the president were also attacked, and that there were shops that were looted, various retailers, appliance stores, banks across the capital. So would you not say that the police are justified?
The police are not really justified, and this is because really under international human rights law, under the human rights obligations of Madagascar, the violence of a group of few people does not really amount to characterizing an entire peaceful protest that took several hours and several parts of the country as being violent. As we could see on Thursday, from around 10:30 a.m. all the way up to 5 p.m., the violence was just coming from the police. And at around 5, many protesters started going home. And there was just really a section of people that many of the protesters do not identify with, that were engaging in these acts of violence. And it is the responsibility of the state actually to protect the protesters, third parties, and really like private property and public property from these people who have been identified as being violent. But the violence of a few people does not amount to characterizing an entire legitimate peaceful protest as being violent.
So just finally, then, if there are a few rogue criminal elements who are behind this, how does not only law enforcement carry out its duties of protecting citizens who are expressing their democratic rights against, as we mentioned, these power cuts and other basic human rights?
Yeah, this really comes down to questions of legal reforms in the country. It is really like about time that Madagascar takes seriously its international obligations when it comes to managing the right to peaceful assembly. And this comes down to really like reforms of how like the police are trained, even like revoking certain laws such as the public order in Madagascar currently, which just grant, police officers and the gendarmes a wide discretion when it comes to handling protest. But also the government has to really address like the core of the issues, which are the socioeconomic rights issues to do with water, to do with electricity, and really other broader issues that the citizens, particularly young people, are demanding right now.
All right, we're going to leave it there with you. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Nsiko Arnold, researcher at Amnesty International East and Southern Africa's regional office, speaking to us about the curfew that's just been imposed in Antananarivo, Madagascar, after violent protests were seen there, particularly yesterday, which he says really was the work of a few rogue elements in a largely peaceful protest. Brings the time to 22 minutes past 9. Now let's take you to news that developed and broke earlier on, and that is dozens of delegates walking out of the UN General Assembly as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to the stage to make his address. Netanyahu denied that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza or starving its people. Instead, he blamed Hamas for preventing Gazans from fleeing danger and of stealing their food. He promised to eliminate the remnants of the group and accused much of the world of forgetting about the atrocities it had committed on October the 7th. Sherman Bryce Pease has more.
Please, order in hall.
The ICC indicted Israeli Prime Minister was greeted in the assembly by loud applause from his delegation and guests in the visitors' gallery, but also a stream of diplomats exiting the room, including South Africa's ambassador who boycotted his speech.
Israel rebounded from its darkest day to deliver one of the most stunning military comebacks in history. But we're not done yet. The final elements, the final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job. That is why we want to do so as fast as possible.
While vowing to never rest until all the hostages were home, he again rejected the growing body of evidence that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, and any notion that Israel was starving people in the enclave, despite an integrated food classification determination of famine affecting hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza, amid continued mass displacement in the enclave.
Take the false charge of genocide. Israel is accused of deliberately targeting civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite is true. The head of urban warfare studies, Colonel John Spencer, he's perhaps the world's greatest expert on urban warfare, and he says, Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. And because we're doing that, the ratio of non-combatant to combatant casualties is less than 2 to 1 in Gaza. That's an astoundingly low ratio, lower than NATO's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially when you consider that Gaza is one of the most densely populated urban areas on Earth.
That ratio is widely disputed, with credible reports in August of an analysis of the Israeli Defense Force's own internal database pointing to over 80% of people killed in Gaza being civilians, a ratio near UN Human Rights Office estimates that over 70% of those killed were women and children, while Netanyahu had sharp words for countries recognizing the state of Palestine this week.
You know what message the leaders who recognize the Palestinian state this week sent to the Palestinians? It's a very clear message. Murdering Jews pays off. Well, I have a message for these leaders. When the most savage terrorists on earth are effusively praising your decision, you didn't do something right. You did something wrong, horribly wrong.
And that there is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the UN General Assembly. That address saw a mass exodus outside or on the onset of his address. But we stay in the US. We focus now on political developments there, where there has been an indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, observers saying this is more than just courtroom drama. It's the latest flashpoint in Donald Trump's campaign of political retribution, with Trump openly pressurizing his Justice Department to target rivals. Critics warn that the firewall between law enforcement and the White House is collapsing. Tonight, we unpack this case with international political expert and former U.S. Ambassador Brooks Spector. What is this really about? Does it signal the future of U.S. democracy, the Republican Party, and Trump's electoral strategy? Well, let's find out. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, former Ambassador Spector.
Well, good evening. Let me just correct. I wasn't an ambassador. I was a diplomat. Embassies only get one ambassador to an embassy. I was one of the lower-ranking people below an ambassador. So I don't want to steal the position that I didn't have.
Okay, but so, I will now I will bestow that upon you, given the error that I've made. But thank you so much for speaking to us. I want to just talk about what has happened here. I mean, does this Comey indictment really mark the moment where Trump finally tears down the institutional firewall, as we said, between the White House and the Justice Department?
Well, it doesn't destroy the firewall, no. What it does is it puts a crack in it for sure, because it's not in law, but it is certainly in standard practice that the White House, that is the chief executive's function, and the Department of Justice in its pursuit of potential criminal behavior, that there has always been a distinction between the two, and that the president cannot simply say, go after my enemies because here's a list and they were bad people and I want you to get them. This is now quite clearly an effort to breach that wall and to use the power of the Justice Department to get back at those people Donald Trump sees as his enemies. But let's be clear that an indictment is simply the first, really the initial step in any sort of criminal proceeding. Lawyers like to say you could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, which means in effect that an indictment is simply you've convinced a group of citizens in a grand jury that there are reasons, there is evidence to proceed to a formal charge and a courtroom process, and potentially a finding of guilt or innocence, and then if so, potentially sentencing thereafter. So it isn't as if it is now written in stone that James Comey is going to go off to the pokey. And he has a team of strong lawyers, and the In fact, the lawyer in the Justice Department who was originally tasked with this case resigned rather than go forward with it, and the Trump administration then, at least temporarily, appointed his personal attorney, one of his personal attorneys, who's never really had any courtroom experience and who has certainly never had any courtroom experience at this level of complexity and
May I jump in there, Mr. Brooks, and say that's precisely the point, that I think there are questions over, President Trump's posture, how hard he's been pushing for this. And therefore, as much as you say it's an indictment to something that's further down the way on whether or not it will lead to an actual trial, the question is about the neutrality of the DOJ and whether or not the Republicans in Congress are agreeing with what some may see the weaponization of the justice system. Do they believe that retribution is more electorally valuable than restraint? This is the bigger question, the perceptions around what is happening.
Yeah, well, this indictment has come so recently that there, I think a lot of the people in Congress among the Republicans, either in the House or the Senate, are still trying to assess exactly where they want to come down on this. And I suspect a fair number of Democrats are as well. Let's remember that James Comey, when he was the head of the FBI, did not endear himself to the Democratic Party either. Way back when Hillary Clinton was running for president, I think it was a week before the election, he issued a note saying that he was reopening the investigation into the so-called private computer server and the emails therein of Hillary Clinton's, which many Democrats think was the ultimate push that made her lose the election rather than win it, even though she had more votes in the popular vote than Donald Trump did. The challenge for Republicans now is clearly to weigh whether or not supporting this or even being neutral about it is more electorally useful to them, or is it potentially harmful? Do people, the citizenry, do they feel that this was a step too far finally? And that's a question that I don't even think the polling answers yet, because this just happened really within the last, 48 hours or so.
President Donald Trump has been accused of overreach. And the question then becomes, even though this might be the first step, could it be seen as another example or referendum on executive overreach by President Donald Trump? And are there constitutional, legal barriers that could force this opinion further on how it ends up, whether Comey ends up facing a trial or not?
Well, there aren't constitutional barriers, but there are certainly evidentiary barriers. Remember, there were three items up for indictment, and the grand jury refused to even indict James Comey on the third. And the decision by the members of the grand jury, the panel, was not unanimous on the other two, which begins to say that there's a certain amount of unease about going this step. I think we also have to see this in terms of all of the other people that Donald Trump sees as his enemies and against whom he wishes to carry out retribution. He's still very annoyed, obviously, about the way in which James Comey carried out or participated in the investigation into whether or not the Republican Party and the Russian government were in some way or another working cooperatively to push the election a certain way in 2016. I think what we're going to find is, as information comes out about the way in which the grand jury made its decision and the weakness of the case that's to hand, we'll be able to get a better measure about whether or not people in the country as a whole think this is a good idea, think this is a bad idea, or even think this is a terrible idea, the imperial overstretch that you're referring to in effect.
Now, for friends and foes of President Donald Trump alike, would they see James Comey, wearing that mantle of a martyr? And how would that be seen, whichever side one is on the fence? As in, is this part of a wider electioneering campaign, or does he have a case to answer to when it comes to what he's being accused of? And just as we've spoken about the legal, but the thing is, will it hurt President Donald Trump if it goes awry?
Well, let's look at a couple of possibilities. The case goes to trial. The Justice Department's attorneys make their best effort, and the jury in the case and the judge participating in this process determined that the charges do not stand the weight of it. The evidence does not support the charges. It's going to look rather awkward for Donald Trump yet again to be pursuing vengeance and retaliation and retribution rather than the administration of justice. If, in fact, somehow the case goes to trial and James Comey is found guilty of one or the other or both of those charges, and there is a sentence of some type, it will look as if he is, in fact, the first martyr to the Republican Party, the president's efforts to win going forward, regardless of the damage that it causes to the nature of government, the democratic process, and so forth. Comey issued a very strong statement saying, "Wait a minute, I'm innocent. This is ridiculous," or words to that effect. And I go back to my point that the grand jury itself was not unanimous on these charges, and they in fact refused to even indict on the third charge, to say that there's some uneasiness about how strong these charges really will be. Now, keep in mind what they are. The charges are that he lied to a congressional inquiry and that he caused in some way the release of not necessarily secret, but certainly not for public distribution, information about the inquiry into the possible Russian efforts back in 2016. And it's going to take an enormous amount of energy to prove either or both of those. I mean, they're not just straightforward. It's not like a murder trial where there's clearly a dead person and you have to explain whether you were there or you weren't there. This is going to be all kinds of shades and inferences and gradations about whether the charges are true, and whether, if they're true, were they meaningful, and if they were meaningful, was there serious substance to the weight of them? Each of those steps is really going to be hard to say. Just going to be an easy ride for the president's team.
Right. Let's leave it there. But thank you so much for your time and your insights. Much appreciated. Former U.S. diplomat and political analyst, particularly in international relations, there, Spectre Brooks, speaking to us about what has happened, the indictment against James Comey, and as he was just explaining there, what they stem from. Brings the time to 19 minutes to 10.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Binalex Sport depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, authorities in 14 African countries have cracked down on cybercrime, arresting 260 people in a sweeping Interpol operation. The 2-week sting, called Operation Contender 3.0, targeted romance scams and sextortion between July 28th and August 11th of this year. Police seized more than 1,200 electronic devices, shut down 81 online crime networks and uncovered nearly 1,500 victims. Losses linked to the scams are estimated at $2.8 million. And we are going to find out exactly how this was carried out. The suspects are accused, though, of exploiting social media and dating platforms using fake profiles, stolen images, and explicit blackmail to trick and threaten their victims. We are going to be joined now by security strategist and retired Interpol ambassador Andy Mashale. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
It is magnificent to talk to you, Tsepiso, and the Heavyweight Show listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it reams like we've seen actually quite a few documentaries popping up, especially on Netflix and other platforms recently. But it reads like a novel, even a horror movie at some point. Tell us a little bit more about how this came about. We know it's been there for quite a while, these instances of cybercrime, especially when we talk about romance and sextortion. In this particular case, how did it come about, the arrests?
Tsepiso, your 2025 Interpol's 2025 cyber threat assessment report indicated that medium to high cases of crime in general are constituted by cyber crimes. Now, this forced all those countries that were identified as hotspots to cooperate in rooting out these satanic people who prey on women who's lost husbands and husbands who's lost women, and ordinary young men, young ladies who want to have a relationship. And they also targeted by way of sextorting those who had fallen in love with people online using fake profiles, using fake pictures, stolen pictures of a man who pretended to be a beautiful woman, or a beautiful woman who pretended to be a great man, hunting down people who want love and getting their details, stealing their details, and then blackmailing them in the event where explicit material was in their possession, requesting explicit pictures and charts, and then blackmailing the lovers who don't know that behind that fake picture is not a man with good intentions.
So we must look at Africa's cybersecurity landscape, while in tandem also looking at these, what do you call them, cyber fraud entrepreneurs or professionals, because it seems like it's become very commonplace. And not that there is victim blaming, but what are the major gaps in preventing this from happening? More and more people are learning how to be careful so that they're not so that they don't fall prey to these crimes. But what is lacking in finally getting a stranglehold on how these criminals use the methods that they do?
So, cybercrime awareness is in or on the back burner in our country, in the 14 countries where these evil people are running riot. Cybercrime awareness is very, very low. And platforms, national platforms like your TV shows, your soapies haven't really opened up to assisting in combating cybercrime. And how will that happen? During your soapies, you do a product placement, in this case, a cyber security a product placement, where people are taught on how to use the device that I have in my hand, and also your tablets or your phablets, and also indicating the seriousness of giving your personal identifiable information to someone who claims to be on the other side of the world, who purports to love you or who professes to love you, only to find, Tshepiso, that the cybercrime operators from an African point of view have established base Morivonia and Morningside. You go to places like Black Hat for entertainment. You find these guys profess love for our sisters in South Africa, and our sisters in South Africa end up losing 5 million rands of their pension money. These are some of the things that we need to do. We need to make use of the very social media that's being used to attack us. We need to turn that vector, that attack vector, into a defense, a counter defense vector.
Now, I want to know whether the police, what have they found when trying to track these perpetrators? Are they using phone routing, VPN providers, malware kits, back to external suppliers, and how are they held culpable? Are they held culpable?
They are not, Tshepiso, because Mohai, here, Molaping, we have a serious challenge of cybercrime combating. I am sure you and I can wake up and go to the 140-something plus police stations only in Gauteng and look for a cybercrimes unit or for a cybercrimes component at police station A or B. They don't exist. So in order for you to be able to track these cyber criminals, you need private partnerships. You need private firms that will join forces with you. In this instance, Interpol and the 14 countries were joined by private sector companies, Group IB as well as Trend Macro, who produce software. They were able to help Interpol, and Interpol also shared their cybercrime activity intelligence, enabling local law enforcement agencies to pounce on the people on the criminals in Ghana, and the authorities were able to arrest 68 people and confiscate 837 devices, Tshepiso, that were used in the commission of these crimes. Okay. And the money that they recovered was about $70,000 US. The losses, financial losses, were as huge as 450,000 USD.
Right, a pity that we can't continue. And perhaps we need to have a longer conversation. Who are the victims? Is there a global syndicate?
Yes.
How do they launder money, etc., etc.? Thank you so much for your time, Andy Mashale, security strategist and retired Interpol ambassador. We certainly are going to revisit this issue of cybercrime, particularly that of romantic scams and sexploitation, as he says.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
It is now 10 minutes to 10. So it is time now for our 2140 feature. Rather late today. We do apologize for that. But let's look back at Heritage Day South Africa. That was yesterday. The country celebrated it, and it celebrated one of its brightest stars. World-renowned soprano Phumeza Matshikiza, fresh from global stages like Rome and Paris, she was inducted into the Roodepoort Theatre's prestigious Wall of Fame during the Joburg City's Theatre's 45th anniversary gala. From the townships of Khayelitsha to opera houses around the world, Phumeza's voice has carried both heritage and hope. Today she joins us to reflect on this milestone, her journey, and the power of music to inspire generations. Phumeza, a very good evening to you. Should I say welcome back to Africa, or should I just say simply welcome to Africa World Hour?
Hello, Sissy. Thank you for having me. Can you see me now?
Well, I'm sure we're going to see your beautiful face in just a moment. But while we get that up and running, so tell us about this momentous recognition that you received, Phumeza. How did it feel? What was going through your mind? And as I mentioned, that you've been on both local and international stages.
Well, when I received the email, I was pleasantly surprised, of course, and having won this award and being inducted into the Hall of Fame means a lot to me, especially that it's coming from my own country. You know, it's given me wings, basically, to conquer the world even more.
And tell us about where your journey has taken you. When you left South Africa, what did you have in mind to do? I think a lot of us want to have our work internationally recognized, the body of our work, because we want to be appreciated on as wide a scale as possible. But some people actually end up forgetting their roots, but you've not done that. You've adapted a lot of our musical heritage, infusing it with what is out there on the world stage, even reworking some of the world's best arias.
Well, I am first and foremost a South African and an African, and that for me is a very important thing that I carry with me all the time. And yes, as much as I sing opera, I also like to sing classical music written by our composers, people like Sibusiso Njeza, Tyamza Hashem Nomia. I think as we copy certain things from other cultures, it's also important for us to export our own culture, what makes us ourselves to the world. And I recently did a recital in Paris, and I put Sibusiso Njeza's music in the program amongst the operatic pieces or the classical songs I was singing. And they were very much appreciated. And actually, people sometimes appreciate those even more than what they are used to. So, yes, I am really proud of being an African, of being a Xhosa, of being a Black woman, and I carry all those things with myself.
You carry all of those, and we have you playing in the background. I was hoping that we'd start off the show so our audiences can just appreciate it's so beautiful and so angelic. Tell us about this young lady, this woman from Khayelitsha, who now finds herself singing Mozart, blending Mozart and Puccini and African traditional songs. Was it hard to break those barriers to help people understand that it doesn't matter where you are, music is music, no matter the language, and there aren't things like European standards or African standards, that when you're good, you're fabulous?
Yeah, well, I come from a very musical family. People who know my surname in South Africa, if you say Matshikiza,
yes.
My surname is always associated with music, composition, stage, theater, directing, so we are an artistic family, the distant cousins of my mother. And also I had a grandfather from my father's side, Mbuleli Nguhlu, who was a choir master. And so I guess everything is somewhere in my genes. But apart from that, as you know, our history, that we are the children of apartheid. And as teenagers, we saw apartheid being dismantled, and opportunities that were not available to Black people started being available to them. And maybe I was in the first group of those people who got the opportunity to go study overseas. Of course, I fell in opera, having heard it on a radio, but before then I was already singing in choirs. And when I had opera on the radio, it was sort of similar to what we were doing already in choirs, but I could tell that these people have had more training. There's something that they were doing on top of what we were doing, and it was quite special. And I wanted to be able to sing like them, or to understand how they trained their voices up to that level. And generally, I am fascinated by the singing voice. I think more than anything, that's what keeps me singing. I'm fascinated by my own voice, by other people's voices, and I know how hard it is to consistently and continuously work on your voice. I mean, of course, there are ups and downs. You know, Europe was a foreign land to me, and how people behave, the weather, the food, everything was different. So I had to get used to that. And it was better because I first went to study in London, to do my postgrad in London. Then I moved to Germany. And I'm happy that I went to London before going to Germany, because then at least I could speak English. But when I went to Germany, in the beginning, I couldn't speak German. Now I do. But had I gone from South Africa to Germany, that would have been really traumatic, I think.
So,
and now...
Sorry to judge in, but I do believe when you're speaking about languages that you also infuse poetry into your performances. And I understand that you recite that sometimes during your singing. Is it just, is a particular language, or is it what you have pieced together? And does some of that include German?
Well, actually, I do write poetry, but I write in Xhosa. I've written not too many poems. I've written about 7 or 8 poems, and I'm going to read them for the first time in November, because William Kentridge is going to be exhibiting. Maybe if you know William Kentridge, he's a South African, a well-known South African artist. So he'll be exhibiting in Essen this November, towards the end of November. And as part of that, myself and an orchestra in Essen will be curating some music for his exhibition. And so I'm going to read my poetry there for the first time. But just now I was in Rome, and I was singing in some palace there, and I was asked to be part of a concert where we were 3 singers, a singer from Iran, from Italy, and myself. And we had to choose like a character from our country, a struggle icon, activist, and my subject was Miriam Makeba. So, and we read in Italian a few phrases about these characters, and we sang operatic pieces in between, and it was quite beautiful. And I feel that my life is now at this stage, my creativity is calling me towards that, because yeah, I think there's got to be more to this. You know, I have many stories I want to tell. Maybe I could tell them through projections. And there's a beautiful dancer I just met here in South Africa. She also got an award on the same day as myself, Kitty Petla. She's an amazing dancer, and she said we should collaborate, and I would like to collaborate with her. I could be singing and she could be dancing, and we could have projections about all sorts of issues that we would like to tackle.
I'm actually envious of those who will get to see, and hopefully we will get to know in time when you're performing and where. I know you've got a very busy diary. Your calendar is taking you from Bucharest, Budapest, Paris, Los Angeles, and I hope you come back home again and do put on a performance such as what you've just said here in South Africa.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, and it's been a privilege to speak to you, Phumeza, and we hope that we encounter you and your beautiful music again. That is Phumeza Matshikiza. She, as we mentioned, is a world-renowned classic music, operatic artist. And that brings the time to exactly, let's take it back by a minute and say it's a minute to 10. Shayla Dikumana, what's happening this Friday?
Listen, very relaxed Friday. We are going to be looking at music. Gondwani Nyamasauka comes in with that top 6 love songs. And then we're going to talk all things cars. So there's this trend where we're seeing Chinese models, very pretty.
Souped up, as they say.
You know, we're going to talk about it. How is the experience? Is my question. Is it really worth the price tag? Because also, the price tag is something people are questioning. They're saying, how are we paying this amount for these kinds of cars?
I just think sometimes we're just so obsessed with brands. If you can get a 4x4 that has the features of your German-made vehicles, why do you want to pay an extra R1 million?
I don't know.
Quality.
No, it's a quality. Okay, we've been schooled that quality comes with a cost or comes at a cost.
You see, and it's not like you don't get quality there. It's just that it's not that verpa the way you're used to.
Yes.
I love cars, and I love the feel of driving a particular, and I can generally, I'll tell you, I feel like this one is more solid on the ground. This has a smoother takeover. What do you call it? Take off, and the features. It never used to be that you could get those social media features.
Yes, on the screen, in the car,
on the smaller cars.
Yes,
but now it's standard.
I know. We've got chargers where you just place your phone there. No cables, no wires needed. These karaoke in cars. What's happening?
They might have strange names like Bojetem, but let's face it, they still perform. The love is there.
The love is there. I love that.
Can we just...
That's what comes up on the show tonight.
All right. Thank you, Shayla. From us, it's good night. Thanks for listening.